The message arrived on a Tuesday morning while Alex Rivera was cataloging soil samples from a mining colony nobody cared about. His small office smelled like coffee and recycled air, and he had been doing the same boring work for 3 years. The encrypted seal on the message made his heart jump. Coalition Command never contacted low-level specialists like him unless something had gone very wrong or very right. Alex opened the message with shaking hands. The words on the screen did not make sense at first. Immediate reassignment, Zephyros Prime, personal attendant to Queen Silvara. Report within 48 hours. He read it 3 times before the reality settled in his mind like a stone dropping into deep water. Zephyros Prime was one of the most important planets in the entire galactic coalition. The Zephyrians were ancient, powerful, and terrifying. Their queens ruled absolutely, and humans rarely got close to their leadership. Why would they want him? He called his supervisor, a tired woman named Karen who usually ignored him. She picked up immediately this time. Her face on the video screen looked surprised and maybe a little jealous. She told him she had received the orders an hour ago and had no idea why he was chosen. She said to pack his things and not ask questions. Important people had made this decision, and important people did not explain themselves to scientists who studied dirt. Alex thanked her and ended the call, feeling more confused than ever. The next day, Alex sat in a briefing room at Coalition headquarters. Commander Lisa Grant stood at the front, a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through people. She explained that the previous attendant to Queen Silvara had quit after 3 weeks. The official reason was philosophical differences, but everyone in the room knew that was code for something else. Grant told Alex that Zephyrians communicated through pheromones and body language as much as words. Humans, surprisingly, could read these signals better than most species. Something about human emotional intelligence made them good at understanding what others felt, even when they tried to hide it. Alex listened as Grant listed the rules. Never look directly at the Queen's wings. Always bow at exactly 45 degrees. Never touch royal furniture without permission. Speak only when spoken to unless it was an emergency. The rules felt endless and impossible to remember. Grant's voice softened when she reached the end of the briefing. She looked at Alex with something that might have been concern or pity. She told him that Queen Silvara was not like other Zephyrians. She said to be careful but also to be kind. Alex wanted to ask what that meant, but Grant dismissed him before he could form the question. The ship ride to Zephyros Prime took 2 days. Alex spent most of that time reading everything he could find about Zephyrian culture. The species had evolved from social insects millions of years ago. They lived in massive hives with strict castes: queens, warriors, workers, and drones. Individual identity mattered less than the collective. Queens were born to rule and connected to their people through something called the hive mind, a psychic network that linked every Zephyrian on the planet. It sounded beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The ship dropped through the atmosphere and Alex pressed his face against the window. Zephyros Prime looked like a jewel from space. The cities were made of crystal that grew from the ground like trees. The palace stood at the center of the capital, a massive structure that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. Alex felt very small suddenly. He was just one human on a planet of billions of aliens who had built civilizations before his species learned to make fire. 2 Zephyrian warriors met him at the landing pad. They were 7 feet tall with armor that looked like it was part of their bodies. Their faces were insectoid, with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when they moved. They did not speak to Alex, just gestured for him to follow. He walked behind them through corridors that seemed to pulse with life. Other Zephyrians stopped to stare at him. He heard clicking sounds that might have been conversation or might have been laughter. He could not tell. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above. Columns of crystal grew from the floor, and the walls seemed to breathe. At the far end of the room, on a throne that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone, sat Queen Silvara. Alex's breath caught in his throat. She was magnificent, 12 feet tall even sitting down. Forearms folded gracefully. Chitin armor that shifted colors from deep blue to purple to green as she moved. Her wings were folded against her back, translucent and veined with patterns that looked like frost on glass. Alex remembered to bow at 45 degrees. He kept his eyes on the floor and waited. The Queen's voice surprised him. It was not harsh or buzzing like he expected. The translator device she wore made her sound almost musical. She spoke in English, Welcoming him to Zephyros Prime, she dismissed her guards with a wave of one hand which seemed to shock them. They hesitated before backing out of the room. When the doors closed, Alex realized he was alone with the most powerful being on the planet. Queen Silvara asked him strange questions. Did he find the palace cold? What did he think about the color purple? Had he ever felt like he did not belong where he was? Alex answered honestly because he did not know what else to do. The queen listened to every word like it mattered. She tilted her head in a way that reminded him of a bird watching something interesting. When he mentioned that he sometimes felt like he was pretending to be someone he was not, her antennae moved in a way that looked almost like surprise. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Queen Silvara told him his quarters were ready. She said they were in the West Wing, close to her own chambers. Alex knew enough about Zephyrian customs to know that was unusual. Personal attendants usually stayed in the servant quarters far from the royal areas. He thanked her and turned to leave. As he reached the door, he looked back without thinking. It was a mistake. He saw her wings flutter in a pattern that was not in any of his briefing materials. If he did not know better, he would have said it looked like loneliness. That night, Alex lay in a bed that was too soft in a room that was too large. He stared at the ceiling and thought about the Queen's questions. She had not asked him about politics or Earth or his qualifications. She had asked about feelings, about belonging, about being understood. Something was happening here that nobody had explained to him. He had been sent to care for an alien queen, but he was starting to suspect that what she needed was not an attendant. What she needed was something humans understood better than any other species in the galaxy. She needed a friend. Alex's first week as Queen Silvara's attendant felt like walking through a dream, where all the rules kept changing. He learned quickly that his official duties were simple on paper, but complex in practice. He attended council meetings where ancient Zephyrians argued about trade routes and military deployments in a language that sounded like music, mixed with clicking insects. He managed the Queen's schedule, which meant knowing when she needed to address her people, meet with ambassadors, or perform sacred rituals. He advised on human customs when questions arose, though those questions happened more often than seemed necessary. The strange part was how much time Queen Silvara wanted him near her. Other attendants worked in shifts and had free time. Alex found himself summoned at all hours. The Queen requested his presence at breakfast, during afternoon walks in the royal gardens, and late in the evening when she reviewed documents. At first he thought she was testing him or maybe did not trust him yet. Then he started noticing small things that changed his mind. The Queen asked him questions that had nothing to do with work. She wanted to know about his childhood on Earth, what his favorite foods were, whether he missed home. She listened to his answers with complete attention, her antennae tilting forward in a way he learned meant genuine interest. Sometimes she would sit in silence for long minutes after he spoke, as if turning his words over in her mind like precious stones. Alex found himself talking more than he had in years. There was something about her presence that made honesty feel natural. The High Vizier did not like Alex. Thexor was older than the palace itself, or so it seemed. His chitin had dulled to a gray color and his movements were slow but precise. He watched Alex with compound eyes that never blinked. During council meetings, Thexor questioned everything Alex said. Why should they care about human opinions? Why was a soft-skinned mammal allowed in sacred spaces? What possible value could this alien bring to their glorious civilization? The Queen always defended Alex calmly, but tension filled the room like smoke whenever Thexor spoke. Alex learned more about Zephyrian culture every day. The society was built on absolute order. Everyone knew their place from birth. Workers maintained the cities. Warriors protected the borders. Drones served the hive. Queens ruled with perfect wisdom passed down through generations. Individual wants and needs did not matter. The collective was everything. Zephyrians did not have art for beauty's sake or music for pleasure. Everything served a purpose. Everything fit into the grand design. It was impressive and suffocating at the same time. But Queen Silvara did not quite fit into this perfect picture. Alex noticed it in small ways at first. She paused before speaking sometimes, choosing words carefully instead of letting them flow from instinct. She spent time alone in the gardens, walking among crystalline flowers that grew in mathematical patterns. Zephyrians were supposed to hate solitude, to always seek connection with the hive mind. Yet the queen seemed to need these quiet moments away from everyone else. One evening, Alex found her in the garden sitting on a bench that overlooked the city. The suns were setting and the crystal buildings caught the light like a million tiny fires. He approached carefully and asked if she needed anything. She gestured for him to sit beside her, which was against protocol, but he obeyed anyway. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Then the queen asked him a question that changed everything between them. She asked if humans ever felt trapped by expectations. Alex thought about the question carefully. He told her that humans struggled with expectations all the time. Parents wanted children to follow certain paths. Society had rules about what was normal and what was not. People pretended to be what others wanted instead of who they really were. He said it was one of the hardest parts of being human, that constant pressure to fit into boxes that felt too small. Queen Silvara's wings trembled slightly. She was quiet for a long time. Then she told him something that no queen was supposed to say. She told him she was not supposed to be queen at all. Her older sister had been raised for the throne, trained from birth, perfect in every way. But her sister died in a border conflict 5 years ago. Silvara had been thrust into the role at 20 years old with no preparation and no choice. She had spent every day since then trying to be what everyone expected, trying to fill shoes that did not fit her feet. Alex listened without interrupting. The queen continued, her voice getting softer. She said she felt like a fraud. She made decisions and hoped they were right, but never felt certain. She connected to the hive mind but felt separate somehow, like she was watching her people from behind glass. She had thoughts and feelings that queens were not supposed to have. She wondered what it would be like to make choices based on what she wanted, instead of what duty demanded. She asked Alex if that made her weak. Alex told her the truth. He said that asking those questions did not make her weak. It made her honest. He said that leaders who never questioned themselves were dangerous because they stopped growing. He told her that humans believed strength came from knowing yourself, including the parts that did not fit perfectly into place. The queen turned to look at him with those massive compound eyes, and for a moment Alex saw past the armor and the title to the person underneath. From that night on, their relationship changed. The queen still called him to official duties, but she also called him when she needed to talk. She showed him things nobody else saw. She played recordings of sounds from the deep caves beneath the palace and asked if he thought they were beautiful. She tried to explain how the hive mind felt, like being one voice in an infinite choir. She confessed that sometimes she wanted to sing a different note just to see what would happen. Alex started teaching her about human culture in return. He showed her images of Earth's oceans and mountains. He played her music, everything from classical symphonies to rock and roll. The queen was fascinated by human art. She could not understand why humans created things that had no practical purpose, but she wanted to learn. Alex explained that art was how humans expressed feelings that words could not hold. It was how they made sense of a universe that often made no sense at all. One night, Alex read her poetry. He chose a poem about feeling alone in a crowd, about wearing masks that grew heavier every day. The queen listened with her wings completely still. When he finished, she sat in silence for almost 5 minutes. Then she asked him to read it again. He did. This time her wings began to shimmer with colors he had never seen before. He checked his reference guide later and found that those colors meant deep emotion, maybe even sadness mixed with relief. She had heard her own heart in words written by a human who died 300 years ago. Alex realized something important during those quiet evenings. The coalition had not sent him to Zephyros Prime because of his skills or knowledge. They had sent him because humans understood something that Zephyrians had forgotten or maybe never knew. Humans understood that being strong did not mean being perfect. They understood that leaders could doubt and still lead. They understood that connection came from sharing vulnerability, not from hiding it behind walls of tradition and duty. Queen Silvara needed someone who could see her as more than a title. She needed someone who would not judge her for having thoughts and feelings that did not fit the Zephyrian mold. She needed a friend who came from a world where friendship meant accepting people exactly as they were, not as they were supposed to be. Alex promised himself he would be that person for her, no matter what anyone else thought. He did not know yet that this promise would change both of their lives, and maybe even change the future of the entire galaxy. 3 months passed like water flowing around stones in a stream. Alex settled into a rhythm with Queen Silvara that felt more natural than anything in his life before. Mornings meant reviewing schedules and preparing for council meetings. Afternoons were for official duties, standing beside the Queen as she made decisions that affected billions of lives. Evenings belonged to them alone, hours spent in quiet conversation that ranged from philosophy to silly jokes that made no sense, but somehow made them both laugh. The Queen was learning to be more human in small ways. She experimented with sarcasm, though her delivery was terrible and often confused the council members who did not understand that she was joking. She asked Alex to teach her about human humor, and he tried his best to explain why things were funny. She never quite got it right, but her attempts were endearing in ways that made Alex's chest feel tight and warm. She was trying so hard to understand his world, and he found himself wanting to know everything about hers. The palace staff noticed the changes in their queen. Workers whispered in corners using pheromones Alex could not read. Some seemed pleased that Silvara appeared happier and more confident. Others worried openly about the human's influence. High Vizier Thexer grew more hostile with each passing week. He questioned every suggestion Alex made during council meetings. He argued that the Queen was straying from tradition, and that tradition was what kept their civilization strong for millions of years. Change, he declared in his buzzing voice, was another word for decay. Alex proposed a cultural exchange program between humans and Zephyrians. He presented the idea during a council session, explaining that both species could learn from each other. Humans could teach Zephyrians about individual expression and creative thinking. Zephyrians could teach humans about cooperation and long-term planning. Queen Silvara supported the proposal immediately, her wings shimmering with enthusiasm that everyone in the room could see. The council was divided. Young members voted in favor. Older members abstained or voted against. The proposal passed by the narrowest margin possible. Working on the exchange program brought Alex and Silvara even closer. They spent long nights in her private study, surrounded by data screens and holographic projections. They debated which human concepts would translate well to Zephyrian minds. They laughed when ideas failed spectacularly. They celebrated small victories like finding the perfect Zephyrian guide to teach humans about pheromone communication. During these sessions, Alex noticed how Silvara's whole demeanor changed. She seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of her crown. The festival of emergence arrived with its promise of tradition and ceremony. Every Zephyrian on the planet participated in some way, celebrating the day their ancient ancestors first emerged from underground caves into the light. Queen Silvara had a central role to play. She would perform the Ascension Dance, a solo ritual performed on a platform in the center of the capital city. Millions would watch in person, and billions more would watch across the planet through broadcasts. The dance was supposed to be perfect, an expression of the Queen's connection to her people and to the endless chain of queens before her. Alex stood in the crowd with other foreign dignitaries, watching as Queen Silvara took her place on the platform. The sun was setting and the crystal city glowed like fire. The Queen began to move, her 4 arms creating patterns in the air while her wings spread wide to catch the dying light. The dance was beautiful beyond words, ancient and powerful. Then, halfway through, something went wrong. The Queen's movements faltered. Her wings stuttered. She stopped completely, standing frozen on the platform while millions watched and waited. Alex recognized what was happening immediately. He had seen panic attacks before, had experienced them himself. The Queen was overwhelmed, drowning in expectations and the weight of all those watching eyes. The crowd grew restless. Zephyrian queens did not make mistakes. They did not freeze. They did not show weakness. Protocol demanded that Alex stay where he was. Protocol said that only Zephyrians could enter the sacred circle during the ceremony. Alex ignored protocol completely. He pushed through the crowd and stepped onto the platform. Gasps rippled through the assembled Zephyrians like wind through grass. Alex walked up to Queen Silvara and extended his hand, a simple human gesture of support and trust. The Queen looked down at him with those enormous eyes. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. She took his hand, and together they began to move. The dance that followed was not the traditional ascension dance. It was something new, a blend of Zephyrian grace and human spontaneity. Alex had no idea what he was doing, but he followed Silvara's lead and added his own movements when they felt right. The queen's confidence returned as they danced together. Her wings caught the light again and her movements became sure and powerful. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their queen and a human created something that had never existed before. When the dance ended, silence stretched across the city like a held breath. Then the Zephyrians erupted in sound, a thunderous clicking and buzzing that Alex's ears could not fully process. He was not sure if they were angry or pleased, but the sheer volume suggested strong emotion. Queen Silvara's wings shimmered with colors he had learned meant joy and relief. She squeezed his hand gently, careful not to hurt his fragile human bones, and he squeezed back. They stood together on that platform while the suns finally set and darkness covered the world. The consequences came quickly. High Vizier Thexor called an emergency council meeting before the night was over. Alex was not invited, but he heard about it from palace workers who whispered the news in broken English. Thexor was furious. He called the dance a desecration of sacred tradition. He demanded that Alex be removed immediately and sent back to Earth in disgrace. He suggested that Queen Silvara undergo a ritual cleansing to restore her proper connection to the hive mind. The implication was clear. The human had corrupted their queen, and the corruption had to be removed before it spread like a disease. Queen Silvara refused to apologize. According to the reports, she stood before the council and defended what had happened. She argued that the Zephyrians had become too rigid, too afraid of anything that did not fit ancient patterns. The galaxy was changing. New species were joining the coalition every year. If the Zephyrians could not adapt and grow, they would become relics of a past that no longer mattered. She said that what happened during the festival was not corruption but evolution. The human's way of thinking was not weakness but strength. The council could not agree on what to do. Some members supported the queen's vision of a more flexible future. Others saw it as dangerous rebellion against everything their civilization stood for. The meeting ended with no resolution, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. Battle lines had been drawn. Traditional Zephyrians on one side, progressive thinkers on the other, and Queen Silvara standing in the middle, trying to lead her people forward while half of them wanted to drag her back. That night, the Queen asked Alex to meet her in the Royal Observatory. It was a place they had never been together before. A dome at the highest point of the palace where the crystal ceiling was clear enough to see every star in the sky. Alex found her standing at the center of the room, looking up at the infinite darkness scattered with lights. He approached slowly and stood beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Queen Silvara broke the silence with words that would change everything between them. She told him she was experiencing feelings she did not understand. She said that queens were supposed to love their people equally and completely, to have no preferences or attachments. But she found herself thinking about Alex constantly. She valued his presence more than any ceremony or duty. When he was near, she felt more like herself than at any other time. When he was away, even for a few hours, something felt wrong or missing. She did not have words for these feelings in her own language, but she had been reading human literature. She thought what she felt might be what humans called love. She wanted to know if that was possible, if a Zephyrian queen could fall in love with a human man. Alex stood very still, his heart hammering in his chest. He looked up at the alien queen who towered over him, so different from him in every physical way. Yet when he looked into those eyes, he saw someone he knew better than almost anyone. Someone who trusted him with her deepest secrets. Someone who made him laugh and made him think and made him want to be better than he was. He realized that somewhere during the past 3 months he had fallen in love too. He just had not admitted it to himself until this moment. He told her yes, it was possible. In fact, it had already happened. The days after their confession felt like walking on glass. Alex and Queen Silvara knew they felt something powerful for each other, but knowing did not solve any of the impossible problems that stood between them. They were from different species with biology so different that basic touch required care to avoid injury. They lived in a society that had never imagined such a relationship and had no framework to understand it. They served a political system that would see their feelings as scandal at best and manipulation at worst. Alex spent long hours alone in his quarters trying to understand his own heart. He admired Queen Silvara's strength and intelligence. He loved how vulnerable she could be despite her power. He enjoyed her company more than anyone he had ever known. When she was happy, it made him happy. When she struggled, he wanted to help carry the burden. These feelings fit every definition of love he knew. But was it enough? Could two beings so fundamentally different build something real together? He did not know the answer, but he knew he wanted to try. News of the festival incident spread beyond Zephyros Prime. Coalition Command heard about the human attendant who violated sacred protocol and somehow got away with it. Ambassador Helen Carter arrived on the planet 3 weeks later. She was a diplomat with 30 years of experience and a reputation for solving impossible problems with patience and clever compromises. Alex met her in a private room that felt too formal for comfort. She looked at him with eyes that had seen everything and were hard to surprise. Carter got straight to the point. She said that Alex's mission was to serve as a cultural advisor, not to become emotionally involved with the queen of one of the coalition's most powerful members. She understood that feelings were complicated, and that he probably had not planned for this to happen, but intentions did not matter when the consequences could affect billions of lives. Some coalition members already viewed humanity's rapid rise with suspicion. An interspecies romance with a ruling monarch would look like manipulation. It would look like humans were using emotional tactics to gain political influence. She strongly recommended that Alex request a transfer before the situation got worse. Alex listened to every word and understood the logic behind them. Then he told Carter something that surprised himself as much as it seemed to surprise her. He said he would not request a transfer unless Queen Silvara asked him to leave. He said that what they had was real and mattered more than politics or appearances. He said that humanity's strength was supposed to be emotional intelligence and connection. If humans ran away every time a relationship became complicated, what did that say about their values? Carter studied him for a long moment, then sighed. She said she would report his decision to command. She also said he should be prepared for consequences that would go far beyond his personal life. Queen Silvara faced even greater pressure from her own people. The conservative faction of the Zephyrian Council grew bolder in their opposition. High Vizier Thexor openly questioned her fitness to rule during public sessions. He cited her emotional instability and her dangerous preference for an alien over her own kind. He reminded everyone that queens were supposed to embody perfect connection to the hive mind. Silvara's individualistic thinking and bizarre attachment to a human proved she had lost that connection. She was leading their civilization toward chaos and weakness. Rumors spread through the palace like poison in water. Some said that Queen Silvara had been corrupted by human pheromones that humans did not even produce. Others claimed that Alex was using some kind of technology to control her mind. The wildest theories suggested that Earth was planning to take over the Zephyrian government through romantic manipulation. Alex heard the whispers and saw the hostile looks from Zephyrians who had once been polite. He knew that staying was making things harder for Silvara, but he also knew that leaving would break something in both of them that might never heal. Despite the pressure from all sides, Alex and Silvara continued to meet in secret. They chose times and places where they would not be observed. The royal gardens at midnight, a forgotten library in the oldest wing of the palace, a maintenance tunnel that only Alex could navigate because his human body fit through spaces too small for Zephyrians. In these hidden moments, they talked about everything. They acknowledged that their feelings were mutual and real. They also acknowledged that they had no idea how to make this work in any practical sense. Queen Silvara proposed an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. She said that instead of hiding their relationship or giving in to pressure to end it, they should be open about it. They should frame it as something positive, a symbol of the new era she wanted to create, an era where individuals could make their own choices, where different species truly understood each other, where love was not constrained by tradition or biology. They could present their relationship as a diplomatic initiative, a demonstration of real interspecies cooperation at the deepest possible level. Alex thought about this plan for 3 days. It was risky beyond measure. It could backfire spectacularly and destroy both of their careers. But it was also honest. It was refusing to apologize for something that felt right, even when the whole galaxy said it was wrong. He told Silvara he was willing to try if she was. They began working on a formal proposal to present to both the Zephyrian Council and the Coalition Assembly. The proposal included expanded cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives studying interspecies relationships, and new protocols for how different species could build genuine connections. They worked on the proposal in secret, knowing they would have only one chance to present it correctly. The document had to be perfect, addressing every possible objection while showing the benefits clearly. They spent weeks refining the language and gathering supporting data. Alex reached out to human scientists who studied interspecies psychology. Silvara consulted with progressive Zephyrian scholars who believed their civilization needed to evolve. Slowly, the proposal took shape into something that might actually work. Then High Vizier Thexor made his move before they were ready. He invoked an ancient law that had not been used in over 2 centuries. He called for a formal challenge to the Queen's authority. The challenge was a legal mechanism that allowed the council to force a queen to prove her worthiness through a series of trials. If she refused to participate, she would be declared unfit and replaced by a successor chosen by the council. If she participated and failed any trial, she would be exiled from Zephyros Prime forever. If she succeeded in all the trials, her authority would be absolute and unquestionable for at least 10 years. The announcement of the challenge sent shockwaves through the planet. It had been so long since a queen was challenged that most Zephyrians thought it was just a historical footnote. But the law was clear and could not be ignored. Queen Silvara had 1 week to prepare for 3 trials. The first would test physical strength and combat ability. The second would test mental acuity and wisdom. The third would test spiritual connection to the hive mind. Each trial would be witnessed by representatives from across the Zephyrian civilization and broadcast to the entire coalition. Alex was forbidden from interfering in the challenge itself. The trials were sacred and could only be completed by Zephyrians. He could watch but not help. The rule felt like torture. He knew that Queen Silvara was strong and intelligent, but he also knew she had been struggling with her connection to the hive mind for months. That struggle was the whole reason she had needed him in the first place. The third trial would test the very thing she was least confident about. If she failed, she would lose everything, and there was nothing he could do to help her. The week before the challenge was the longest of Alex's life. He helped Silvara prepare as much as he was allowed. They reviewed ancient texts together, looking for any advantage or insight. He encouraged her to trust herself and to use her unique perspective as strength rather than weakness. He reminded her that she had already proven herself capable by ruling successfully for 5 years despite her doubts. She had made good decisions. She had protected her people. She had started changes that would make their civilization stronger in the long run. None of that would matter if she could not pass these 3 trials. The night before the first trial, Queen Silvara asked Alex to meet her one last time. They stood together in the observatory where she had first confessed her feelings. The stars above them were the same as always, cold and distant and beautiful. Silvara told him that no matter what happened, she was grateful they had met. She said he had given her something precious that she never knew she was missing. He had shown her what it meant to be understood and accepted exactly as she was. If she failed the challenge and lost her throne, she would not regret the choices that led her there. Alex took her hand carefully, mindful of her strength and his fragility. He told her he felt the same way. Then they stood together under the stars and waited for the dawn that would change everything. The great arena had stood in the center of the capital city for 10,000 years. It was a massive circle carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Millions of Zephyrians filled the seats that rose in tiers toward the sky. Billions more watched through broadcasts that reached every corner of the planet and beyond. Alex stood in a section reserved for foreign dignitaries, his heart hammering so hard he thought everyone around him must be able to hear it. Queen Silvara stood in the center of the arena floor, looking small despite her size against the vast emptiness of stone. Her opponent entered from the opposite side. Commander Zethus was a warrior who had fought in 100 battles and never lost. He was massive even by Zephyrian standards, his chitin scarred from years of combat. His forearms were thick with muscle and his wings were torn in places from old wounds. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how strong he was. The crowd roared with approval when he took his position. The first trial was simple. 2 entered the circle. 1 would leave it as the winner through submission or incapacitation. There were no other rules. The signal to begin echoed across the arena. Zethus charged immediately, using his size and strength to try to end the fight quickly. Queen Silvara moved differently than expected. She did not meet his charge with equal force. Instead, she stepped aside at the last possible moment, using his momentum against him. The movement was not traditional Zephyrian combat. It was something Alex recognized from martial arts videos they had watched together during quiet evenings. She was improvising, refusing to follow the patterns everyone expected. The fight continued for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Zethus relied on overwhelming power and techniques perfected over centuries. Silvara was faster, more creative, unpredictable. She used the environment to her advantage, staying near the stone pillars that marked the circle's edge. She struck at unexpected angles and retreated before Zethus could counter. Alex watched her transform from a queen burdened by doubt into a warrior who had found her own style. She was not fighting the way she was supposed to. She was fighting the way that worked for her. In the end, Queen Silvara won through intelligence rather than strength. She maneuvered Zethus into a position where his own body blocked his ability to use 3 of his 4 arms. Then she applied pressure to a nerve cluster that every Zephyrian warrior knew, but that Zethus had not expected her to target. He submitted with a clicking sound that meant respect mixed with surprise. The crowd's reaction was complicated. They had witnessed their queen prove her physical prowess, but she had done it in a way that challenged tradition. Some cheered loudly. Others sat in confused silence. The trial was passed, but it had not settled any of the deeper questions about Silvara's fitness to rule. The second trial took place 3 days later in the Hall of Wisdom. This time there was no physical combat, just Queen Silvara sitting before the council's most respected scholars. They presented her with complex scenarios, hypothetical crises that tested her judgment and decision-making ability. A plague threatens the worker caste. Do you sacrifice a small group to save the majority? A border conflict erupts with a neighboring species. Do you respond with military force or diplomatic negotiation? The questions came fast and each one had no perfect answer. Queen Silvara answered each scenario carefully. Her responses were not traditional. Where a conventional queen would prioritize collective survival above all else, Silvara considered the emotional impact on individuals. She proposed compromises that no one had suggested. She talked about seeking help from other coalition species when appropriate. She admitted uncertainty when she felt uncertain, which was something Zephyrian queens never did. The scholars were divided in their assessment. Some saw her answers as weak and dangerous. Others recognized them as innovative and potentially more effective in a galaxy that was more connected and complex than ever. Before, the council debated for hours after Queen Silvara left the hall. Alex waited in his quarters, unable to eat or sleep. He received no news until the next morning, when a messenger arrived with the verdict. The second trial was declared a draw. Silvara had demonstrated sufficient wisdom to rule, but her approach was controversial enough that the council could not give her a clear victory. Everything now depended on the third trial, the communion. If she failed to connect properly with the hive mind, she would lose the challenge and her throne. The communion was the most sacred ritual in Zephyrian culture. It took place in a chamber deep beneath the palace where the walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with bioelectric energy. Queen Silvara would enter the chamber alone and reach out to the collective consciousness of every Zephyrian on the planet. If the connection was strong and true, the crystal walls would glow with light visible from the surface. If the connection failed, the chamber would remain dark. There was no way to fake success. The hive mind either accepted you or it did not. Alex stood in an observation room carved into the stone above the communion chamber. He could see Queen Silvara enter the circular space below through a thick crystal window. She looked so alone down there, a single figure in an empty room that suddenly felt like the most important place in the universe. The door sealed behind her. Alex pressed his hand against the window, knowing she could not see him or feel his presence. He tried to send her strength anyway, a silent prayer or wish or whatever humans did when they had no power to change what mattered most. Queen Silvara began the ritual by standing completely still in the center of the chamber. Alex knew from his research that she was supposed to empty her mind of individual thoughts and open herself to the collective. For a Zephyrian queen raised from birth for this purpose, it should be as natural as breathing. For Silvara, who had spent months developing a stronger sense of self, it was like trying to unbecome everything she had learned. The minutes stretched out. The crystal walls remained dark. Alex felt his chest tighten with fear that he tried to push away because fear would not help anyone. Something was wrong. Alex could see tension in the queen's body even from this distance. Her wings were trembling, her forearms clenched into fists. She was fighting the connection instead of accepting it. He understood why. She had spent so long trying to find her own identity that surrendering it felt like death. But the ritual required surrender. It required losing yourself in something greater. Alex wanted to shout at her, to tell her that maybe she was approaching this wrong. Maybe the point was not to lose herself, but to bring her whole self to the hive. Maybe true connection meant offering your unique perspective rather than erasing. Queen Silvara seemed to realize something in that moment. Her body relaxed. Her wings stopped trembling and spread wide. Instead of trying to empty her mind, she filled it. She thought about Alex and the conversations they had shared. She thought about the poetry that had touched her heart. She thought about the questions she had asked and the doubts she had felt. She thought about what she had learned from knowing a human who saw the universe differently than she did. She offered all of it to the hive mind, not as a confession of weakness, but as a gift of new understanding. The crystal walls began to glow. The light started as a faint pulse, then grew brighter and brighter until Alex had to shield his eyes. The glow was not the steady white light that previous queens had produced. It was rainbow-colored, shifting through the spectrum like oil on water. It was something new, a connection that had never existed before. Queen Silvara had not just achieved communion with the hive mind. She had changed what communion meant. She had shown her people that you could be an individual and still be connected. That strength came from diversity rather than uniformity. When the chamber doors opened and Queen Silvara emerged, she was transformed. Her chitin gleamed with patterns that had not been there before, swirling designs that seemed to move across her body. Her wings glowed with soft light that would take days to fade completely. The Zephyrians who witnessed her emergence fell silent, then began clicking in a rhythm that Alex had learned meant awe or reverence. Even High Vizier Thexor could not deny what had happened. Queen Silvara had not only connected with the hive mind, but had done so in a way that was deeper and more profound than any queen in recent history. The council convened immediately to deliver their verdict. Alex waited outside the chamber with representatives from a dozen species who had come to witness the historic challenge. When the doors finally opened, High Vizier Thexor emerged looking like he had aged 100 years in a single day. He announced in a voice that carried no emotion that Queen Silvara had passed all 3 trials. Her authority was confirmed and absolute. No one could question her fitness to rule for at least 10 years. The crowd erupted in celebration or dismay depending on which faction they belonged to. Alex found Queen Silvara in her private study an hour later. She was standing by the window looking out at the crystal city that stretched to the horizon. He approached quietly and stood beside her. She turned to look at him with eyes that seemed to hold more depth than before. She told him that during the communion, she had felt the hive mind accept not just her but the changes she wanted to make. Queen Silvara moved quickly after the challenge ended. She had won the right to rule without question for 10 years, and she intended to use every moment of that time to transform her civilization. The first change came within days. She created a new council structure that included representatives from the worker and warrior castes, not just the traditional noble families. This move shocked everyone. For millions of years, only the highest caste had advised queens. Now voices that had never been heard in the palace halls began speaking about the lives they actually lived. Alex was given an official position that recognized what he had been doing all along. Queen Silvara created the Cultural Exchange Bureau and named him its director. The title came with real authority and a staff of both humans and Zephyrians who believed in what they were trying to build. The Bureau's mission was to facilitate deeper understanding between species, starting with extensive programs between humans and Zephyrians. Within weeks, they had designed exchange programs where young Zephyrians would study on Earth and young humans would live in Zephyrian cities. It was ambitious and expensive and absolutely necessary. Not everyone celebrated these changes. High Vizier Thexor had been forced to accept the challenge results, but he did not have to like them. He and his conservative faction worked quietly to undermine every reform. They created bureaucratic obstacles that delayed implementations. They spread rumors that the Queen's new policies were weakening the hive's unity. They warned workers and warriors that listening to individual desires would lead to chaos and the collapse of everything their ancestors had built. The resistance was subtle but persistent, like water slowly wearing away stone. But Queen Silvara also discovered unexpected allies. Young Zephyrians from all castes expressed excitement about the possibility of choice and self-expression. Scientists who had felt constrained by tradition began proposing research that crossed established boundaries. Artists emerged from shadows, creating works that reflected personal vision rather than collective purpose. The Queen's approval ratings, measured through complex pheromone surveys that analyzed the emotional climate of the population, climbed steadily upward. Change was frightening, but it was also exhilarating for those who had dreamed of something different. The coalition took notice of what was happening on Zephyros Prime. Ambassador Carter, who had initially been skeptical of Alex's choices, became one of their strongest supporters. She saw that the reforms were working, that the Zephyrian people were responding positively to greater freedom and inclusion. She proposed that Zephyros Prime host the next Coalition Summit, a prestigious event that happened only once every 5 years. Hosting the summit would showcase the planet's transformation to leaders from hundreds of species. It would prove that evolution was possible even for the most ancient civilizations. Queen Silvara and Alex's relationship continued to develop in ways that defied simple description. They could not have a traditional romantic relationship by human or Zephyrian standards. Their biology was too different. But what they built together was deeper than what either culture typically allowed. They were partners in every meaningful sense. They made decisions together. They supported each other through difficult moments. They shared joy when things went well and divided sorrow when things went wrong. They had created something unique, a bond that transcended species and showed what genuine connection looked like. Queen Silvara made their relationship official in a way that shocked the galaxy. She created a new position in Zephyrian government that had never existed before. She named Alex her royal consort and chief cultural liaison. The title recognized him as her partner in leadership and gave him formal authority in matters of interspecies relations. The announcement sparked immediate debate across coalition space. Some species praised the bold move. Others questioned whether it was appropriate. Humans were particularly divided, with some celebrating and others worrying that Alex had bitten off more than he could chew. The Coalition Summit became the focus of all their efforts. Zephyros Prime had to be ready to welcome representatives from dozens of species with wildly different needs. The palace was renovated to include chambers with different atmospheric compositions. New protocols were written for how to accommodate beings who communicated through methods ranging from sound to light to electromagnetic fields. Cultural performances were planned that would showcase both traditional Zephyrian art and new works that reflected the changing society. Security had to be perfect because bringing together so many powerful leaders in one place was always risky. Alex worked 18-hour days coordinating everything. He mediated disputes between species representatives who had ancient grudges. He solved logistical nightmares like how to house beings who needed gravity 3 times Earth normal in a palace designed for insectoids. He helped Queen Silvara prepare her keynote address, the speech that would set the tone for the entire summit. They spent long nights refining every word, knowing that this was their chance to articulate a vision for the coalition's future. A vision where diversity was strength and where connection between different peoples was possible, if you were brave enough to try. 5 days before the summit was scheduled to begin, disaster struck. Someone leaked documents that appeared to show Alex had been manipulating Queen Silvara from the beginning. The fabricated records suggested that Earth had sent him with specific instructions to seduce the Queen and gain influence over Zephyrian policy. They included fake communications between Alex and human intelligence agencies. They painted their entire relationship as a calculated political operation, rather than genuine affection between two people who had found each other against impossible odds. The scandal exploded across coalition media. Delegates who had confirmed attendance at the summit began withdrawing. Species that had been suspicious of humanity's rapid rise pointed to the documents as proof of their concerns. Ambassador Carter contacted Alex in a panic, asking if any of it was true. He assured her it was not, but the damage was done. Lies spread faster than truth, especially when they confirmed what people already wanted to believe. Within hours, everything they had built seemed to be collapsing. Queen Silvara faced an impossible choice. She could publicly defend Alex and risk confirming the accusations by appearing too emotionally attached to see his manipulation. She could distance herself from him and protect her political position, but lose the partner who had helped her become the leader she was meant to be. The conservative faction led by Thexor demanded immediate action. They called for Alex's arrest and deportation. They insisted the Queen prove her loyalty to Zephyros Prime by cutting all ties with the human who had corrupted her judgment. Alex met with Queen Silvara in her private study the night the scandal broke. He told her he would leave voluntarily if that would help. He said he understood the political pressure she was under, and that he did not want to be the reason she lost everything she had fought for. Queen Silvara listened to his words, then made a decision that would define her reign. She told him no. She said they had been honest from the beginning about who they were and what they felt. Running away now would validate every accusation. Instead, they would face this together and prove that truth was stronger than lies. Queen Silvara called an emergency press conference that was broadcast live across Coalition space. With Alex standing beside her in full view of cameras from 100 worlds, she addressed the accusations directly. She admitted that her relationship with Alex had profoundly influenced her decisions, but not through manipulation. It had taught her the value of individual choice, emotional honesty, and the courage to challenge traditions that no longer served their purpose. She said that if questioning ancient patterns and learning from other species was corruption, then she was guilty and proud of it. Then Queen Silvara revealed evidence that her security team had uncovered. The leaked documents were forgeries created using old communications that had been altered. The digital signatures did not match Earth's official encryption protocols. Most damning of all, the trail of the leak led back to members of High Vizier Thexor's faction. They had manufactured the entire scandal in a desperate attempt to destroy the reforms before the summit could showcase their success. Queen Silvara formally removed Thexor from his position and replaced him with a progressive council member who had supported change from the beginning. The response to Queen Silvara's speech was immediate and overwhelming. Public opinion shifted dramatically in her favor across both Zephyros Prime and the wider coalition. Her honesty and strength impressed leaders who had been skeptical. Many who had withdrawn from the summit reversed their decisions. Messages of support flooded in from species that admired her courage to stand by her principles, even when facing enormous pressure. The scandal that was supposed to destroy her had instead become proof of exactly what she had been arguing all along. That truth and genuine connection were stronger than fear and tradition. In the aftermath, Alex and Queen Silvara stood together on the balcony of her private chambers. The city spread out below them, millions of lights beginning to glow as the sun set. She turned to him and spoke in English that had become nearly flawless through months of practice. The Coalition Summit began on a morning when both of Zephyros Prime's suns rose together, casting double shadows across the Crystal City. Ships descended from orbit carrying delegates from every corner of the galaxy. They came in vessels that looked like flowers made of metal, geometric shapes that defied physics, and organic constructs that were half ship and half creature. The landing pads filled with beings that represented the incredible diversity of intelligent life. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few existed as patterns of energy contained in specialized suits. It was the largest gathering of species in Coalition history. Alex stood at Queen Silvara's side as they greeted each delegation. He had memorized proper greetings for 60 different species and hoped he would not accidentally insult anyone. The delegates studied him with curiosity. Many had heard about the human who had somehow won a Zephyrian queen's trust and affection. Some looked at him with respect. Others seemed skeptical. A few appeared genuinely interested in understanding how such an unlikely partnership had formed. Alex met each gaze steadily, refusing to show the nervousness that churned in his stomach like a storm. The opening ceremony took place in the Great Hall, a space so enormous that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Representatives from hundreds of species filled seats arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. Queen Silvara would deliver the keynote address, and everyone knew it would set the tone for everything that followed. Alex watched from the front row as she took the platform. She stood completely still for a moment, and he could see her gathering courage. Then she began to speak in a voice that the translation devices carried to every being in the hall. Queen Silvara spoke about evolution, Not the biological kind that happened slowly over millions of years, but the cultural evolution that species chose for themselves. She said that the Zephyrians had believed their way of life was perfect and unchangeable. They had been wrong. Perfection was not about staying the same forever. It was about having the courage to grow when growth was needed. She talked about what she had learned from humans, from Alex specifically. She learned that strength came from acknowledging weakness, that leaders who questioned themselves made better decisions than those who never doubted. That connection between different beings was possible if both sides were willing to be honest and vulnerable. The speech lasted 30 minutes, and when it ended, the hall erupted in response. Some species showed approval through sound, others through light, and a few through pheromones that specialized devices made visible as colored clouds. Alex felt tears on his face and did not bother wiping them away. Queen Silvara had spoken truth that resonated across every cultural boundary. She had articulated a vision of a future where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, where species learned from each other rather than staying isolated in their ancient patterns. The applause continued for nearly 10 minutes, and Alex knew that something fundamental had just shifted in galactic politics. The summit continued for 5 days. Each day brought discussions about cooperation, trade, security, and cultural exchange. The most significant moment came on the third day when the Coalition Assembly ratified the Personal Autonomy Accord. The document recognized the right of individuals across all member species to make personal choices, including in relationships, as long as those choices did not harm others. It was revolutionary legislation that would reshape societies across the galaxy. Many species had laws and traditions that limited personal freedom in the name of collective good. Now those restrictions faced questions they had never confronted before. The accord passed with overwhelming support, though not without opposition. Conservative factions from several species argued that it interfered with cultural sovereignty and would lead to chaos. Progressive groups celebrated it as long overdue recognition of individual dignity. The debate would continue for years, but the principle had been established. Personal choice mattered. Individual identity had value. People could love who they loved, even across species boundaries, even when tradition said it was impossible. Alex and Queen Silvara had become symbols of this new era, whether they wanted to be or not. As the summit drew to a close, Alex received a message from Earth. Coalition. Command offered him a promotion and a position at headquarters on Earth. They said his work had exceeded all expectations and that he had earned recognition and advancement. He could come home, return to his own species, and build a career at the highest levels of human diplomacy. It was everything he had once dreamed of, back when he was a bored scientist cataloging soil samples and wondering if his life would ever matter. He read the message 3 times, then deleted it without responding. Alex found Queen Silvara in the gardens where they had spent so many evenings talking. She was standing among the geometric flowers, watching water flow through channels carved in crystal. He told her about the offer from Earth. He said that Earth was not his home anymore. His home was here, with her, helping to build the future they both believed in. She turned to look at him with those enormous compound eyes that he had learned to read as well as any human face. Her wings shimmered with colors that meant joy mixed with relief. She had been afraid he would leave, though she would have understood if he did. Now she knew he would stay, and that knowledge settled something deep in both their hearts. In the weeks after the summit, life on Zephyros Prime began to show the effects of change. Young Zephyrians started asking questions their parents had never considered. What if they wanted to pursue interests outside their assigned caste? What if they wanted to form connections based on preference rather than duty? The society creaked and groaned under the pressure of transformation, but it did not break. Queen Silvara guided her people through the uncertainty with patience and strength. She made mistakes and admitted them. She adjusted policies when they did not work. She listened to criticism and learned from it. She was not a perfect ruler, but she was an honest one, and that made all the difference. Conservative factions still existed and still opposed the reforms. They would continue to resist for years, maybe generations. Change never came easily to civilizations built on millions of years of tradition, but the progressives had momentum now. Young voices were speaking up, demanding the right to shape their own futures. Artists were creating works that challenged assumptions. Scientists were pursuing research that crossed established boundaries. The Zephyrian civilization was evolving in real time. And while the process was messy and difficult, it was also beautiful to witness. 6 months after the summit, Alex and Queen Silvara stood together on the balcony, where they had shared so many important moments. The suns were setting again, painting the sky in colors that had no names in any human language. They stood in comfortable silence, not needing words to communicate what they felt. After a while, Queen Silvara spoke. She said that when Alex first arrived, she had been drowning in expectations and loneliness. She had needed someone to see her as more than a title, and he had given her that gift. He had shown her that being herself was not weakness but the foundation of real strength. Alex smiled and told her she had taught him just as much. She had shown him that leadership meant vulnerability, that admitting doubt was the beginning of wisdom, and that love could exist in forms he had never imagined. He said that humans like to think they were special because of their emotional intelligence and adaptability. But what made them actually special was their ability to recognize those same qualities in others, even when those others looked nothing like them. Humanity's greatest strength was seeing people rather than categories, individuals rather than representatives of groups. Queen Silvara had helped him understand that truth more deeply than he ever had before. The future stretched before them, uncertain and full of challenges. Conservative opposition would not disappear overnight. Other species would test the boundaries of the personal autonomy accord. There would be setbacks and failures and moments when progress seemed impossible. But Alex and Queen Silvara would face all of it together. They had built something rare and precious, a partnership that transcended biology and culture. They had proven that understanding was possible, that genuine connection could bridge any divide, and that love was not limited by what tradition said was allowed. As the stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Queen Silvara reached out one of her 4 hands. Alex took it carefully, always mindful of their different strengths. They stood like that for a long time, a human and a Zephyrian, 2 beings from different worlds who had somehow found each other in a galaxy of infinite possibilities. They had started as queen and attendant, had become friends, then partners, then something more complex and beautiful than any simple word could capture. They were proof that the future did not have to look like the past. They were proof that evolution was not something that happened to you, but something you chose. They were proof that love was the strongest force in the universe, stronger than tradition, stronger than fear, stronger even than